In this video, we'll look at job phase quote requests. And quick disclaimer, I'll be saying either request for quote or quote request quite a bit. They mean exactly the same thing, so if I switch between the two, don't worry, I'm talking about the same process. We'll cover what a job quote request is, how it differs from the estimate version, and then we'll walk through two specific examples. One will be refining an existing budget, where you're looking to tighten up a price or get it requoted, and the other will be a situation where something changes mid-job and the client wants something completely new, so you'll need to send out a new quote request for that. Jumping into my account, and first off, going over the difference between an estimate request for quote and a job request for quote. Where they are the same is that the goal is to send a request for quote to one or more people, asking them for a price. And if you send it to multiple people, they won't see or know about each other. Each one just gets their own request and can respond with their own price. Where they differ is mainly in when and how they're used. In the estimate phase, as you'd expect, it's used while you're putting your estimate or budget together. Once you get those responses back, the selected price automatically drops into your estimate, meaning that supplier or subcontractor's price becomes part of your quote. In the job phase, it's a little different. It happens while the job is already underway. You'll use it when you need to refine a budget, get updated pricing, or reach out to vendors for new work that wasn't originally part of the estimate. And once you create a job quote request, it can later be turned into a purchase order, work order, or change order, depending on what you're doing with it. We'll look at both scenarios in detail, one where the quote request becomes a purchase order, and another where it becomes a change order. The more you use requests for quotes, the more you'll see how flexible they can be. There are a lot of creative ways to use them depending on your workflow. So let's start with the first example. As I've mentioned in other videos, whenever you're creating a purchase, expense, or change order, it's usually best to start from your actual costing screen. That applies here too. If there's something in your actual cost that you want to update or reprice, you can grab that line item and send out a request for quote for it. In this case, I'm going to refine the $1,000 drywall price I already have. Maybe I originally sent out a quote request back in the estimate phase, and now I just want to reach out to a few more subcontractors to see if anyone can give me a better price. Or maybe I just put in a rough number before, and now I need an actual quote from someone who's going to do the job. So let's grab that line item and click New Quote Request down below. Now in the estimate version of this video, we go through this setup of sending a quote request in more detail, and we also show you what the recipient sees when they get your request. So here, I'll move a bit quicker, but I'll still walk you through the key steps. I'll call this one Drywall Quote. The recipient will see this, and they'll see the deadline date, meaning when I need their response back. And this is the line they'll be pricing on. Then we'll click Next, and here you can attach plans, takeoffs, or any files they might need. And you can also add some scope notes to make it clear what you want them to price. And remember, you can set up presets for this exactly like we did in the estimate quote request. I'm going to send this one to myself, and as mentioned before, if you send a request to multiple people, they won't see or know about each other, which means you can easily cross-compare their quotes later. In the invite message, you can write a quick note, maybe a thank you or any extra instructions, and then click Send. Now, you'll see there's an open quote request attached to this item. And like anything blue, it's clickable. Clicking on it takes me straight into the Request for Quotes tab. From here, I can click Show Recipients to see who I sent it to and the status of their responses. I'm going to cheat a bit here for this example. Let's say one of the trades got the email, but gave me their price verbally, maybe over the phone or on the job site, instead of them replying through BuildExact. In that case, I'll click View, then Costings, and enter their price manually. And here I can indicate if that cost is excluding or including tax. In this example, I'll say it's included in what they quoted. When I click Save and Close, BuildExact will confirm the entry and ask if I want to send a confirmation email to the recipient. This is really handy because it keeps everything documented. It covers you in case someone later says, hey, I never gave that price. And we usually recommend sending the confirmation. But if you don't want to, that's fine too. Now that I've got the price submitted, the next step is to mark it as chosen. In this case, since I'm just refining a price, I might see that it's no better than the original and just leave it there. No further action needed. Or if it's a better price, I might want to go ahead and choose them to do the work. So if I click my chosen quote request, I can then turn this into a purchase order. And quick side note, you can also convert it into a work order, though that's not as common, but some larger companies do that for internal work between departments, which is valid, but for most users, your quote request will usually end up becoming either a change order or a purchase order. I'll select purchase order, and there's a separate video that walks through how purchase orders work in detail, so I won't go into detail about that here, and I'm going to skip all the sending steps and jump straight into marking it as received. And here I can make edits to what we actually paid. If it had come in higher or lower, I could edit that cost here, but in this example, we'll say it came in spot on, same as what I was quoted, so I'll leave it as it is. And because I started the quote request from that line item in my actual costings, when I create the purchase order and log what I spent, it automatically links back to the same line to compare what I estimated versus what it actually cost. And now when I go back to the actual costings tab and open my drywall category, I can see that price here. And note that my $900 included tax. This price here is without tax. And as we've mentioned in other videos, the actual costing screen works without tax and without markup. If I click the blue text, you'll see the full journey it went on. We started with the quote request, which then turned into a purchase order, and finally, when we received it, we logged our cost. And I could click on either of those to take a closer look at how we got there. Now on to the second example. This one's what we call a standalone quote request. It's called that because it has nothing to do with anything we originally estimated for. In other words, it's not a part of the actual costing screen. And usually this happens when a client says something like, hey, while you're here, could you do X, Y, and Z? And in that case, you'll need to do a quote request to get a price for that new work. So we'll head to the Request for Quotes tab and click the button to start a new request for quote on its own. I'll go through this one quickly since we've already covered the setup steps. Let's say it's for a skylight installation. I'll hit next, select who to send it to, and in this case, I'm just sending it to myself for the example. Now it's out there in the ether and hopefully they're reviewing it and replying to it, but just to save time, I'm going to cheat again and update the price on their behalf. Let's say the cost came back at $1,200. I'll hit save and close. From here, I'm going to mark it as chosen and then click to turn it into a change order. Once I do that, it'll also be listed in the change order screen. But an important note, if a client asks for something extra and you need to get a price first, always start from the request for quote screen. We've had people try to start from a change order and then send a request for quote, but that flow isn't supported. So remember, if you know you'll need to get a price or send a request for quote as part of a change order, start from the Request for Quotes tab. And we do have a dedicated change orders video, so I'll quickly work through this. For now, I'll just put it in as a labor component, but if this were a real client request, I'd probably also add the skylight itself here, then combine everything together just like a normal change order, and then send it to the client. The main difference here is that because this kind of change order is more like a mini proposal, the client might reject it, but otherwise, creating it, sending it, using it, even getting it digitally signed, it all works the same as any other change order. And that is all for the job phase request for quotes. As always, if you have any questions, please let us know.